Hello. Hello, everyone. Just waiting for a few moments for everyone to join us on the call. But I don't want to wait too long as we have a lot to get to. So hello and welcome to another online presentation from Biometric Update. I'm your host and the managing editor of Biometric Update, Chris Burt. We talk about the important issues and hot topics in biometrics and digital identity around the world. Today we're going to talk about age verification in India, and specifically technology, policy, and the Digital Personal Data Protection Act. The DPDPA is coming, and while some details, including full implementation date, are still uncertain, we can expect many businesses will soon have to be able to gather verifiable parental consent to process children's data. This is an important change for people accessing the internet in India, for children in India, for businesses in India, and for businesses with users in India. This is also India's unique spin on a global trend. So we're going to hear today a little bit more about the DPDPA itself and its impact on children and businesses in Indian internet users. We're going to hear a little bit more about that global trend as well and how the two fit together. We're very fortunate today to have an excellent panel. So joining us to talk about what this means for internet users in India and businesses all around the world. We are very fortunate to be joined by Shreya Suri, partner at CMS INDUSLAW. Thank you for joining us today, Shreya. Can you maybe start us off by just telling us a couple minutes about CMS?
Thanks, Chris. I'm delighted to be on this panel. Thank you for inviting me. CMS is a global network of law firms. We are present in over 49 countries and we have more than 80 offices worldwide. It's basically a network of independent law firms. CMS INDUSLAW, formerly INDUSLAW, has joined the network very recently, and we remain independent, but INDUSLAW in India is present in all the major business hubs in the country, the National Capital Region of India, Mumbai, Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad. And we are a full service law firm, and we provide support to domestic as well as global clients looking to enter the Indian market, or advising them on cross-border issues and challenges, whether it relates to inbound work or outbound work. And in terms of my practice specifically, I specialize in technology and data protection. And that is the subject matter I will be speaking about today. So in terms of the work we do, we advise clients on impact assessments that any proposed or existing legislation is going to have, guide them on navigating the regulatory framework. And we also advise on structuring their product and business models in India. Of course, that's a small part of what we do, but I will limit it to that for the focus of this discussion.
That's perfect. That's exactly the expertise and experience that we're going to be drawing on as we have our discussion today. We are also very lucky to have with us today Pratishtha Arora, who is CEO of Social and Media Matters. Pratishtha is also bringing an important, different but important, relevant local perspective to our discussion today. So Pratishtha, thank you very much for joining us. And can you please give us a couple of minutes on social and media matters?
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you, Iain, for nominating my name to be on this panel today. Really delighted to be here. And talking about social media matters, the work that we do, specifically in the space of age assurance, and also, of course, youth safety and child safety. That is the USP of the work that we do. So Social Media Matters is a non-profit organization which works on digital rights of the user and in India. And we have spanned all across India to talk about digital safety of users, especially when it comes to the capacity building program. So coming from a civil society perspective, we have done policy work, we have done research work, and our forte is into capacity building of youth, of how to navigate digital spaces more safer and with more security and with more safety. And we also run helpline for digital users to help them with any sort of difficulties and challenges that they come across on digital mediums. And with respect to child safety, we quite work a lot on protection of children in the online spaces. Helping the big tech companies with their policies, how that needs to be child-centric, and also speaking to parents, educators, and caregivers that why age assurance is a core in India right now, and what it means for them to know about the digital laws that exist that can prevent and safeguard children in the online spaces.
Fantastic. So both the parent and child side and the business side as well represented there. So thank you very much, Pratishtha. We also are joined by Iain Corby, Executive Director of the Age Verification Providers Association. Thank you for joining us again, Iain, and welcome. And please tell us, for those on the call who are unfamiliar with the AVPA, tell us a little bit about what you do with that organization.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for having us. The AVPA is the Age Verification Providers Association. We're the global trade body for providers of age verification, age estimation, and to follow the terminology of the latest international standard 27566, age inference. So 3 different sets of methodology for proving your age online. And obviously we're in the UK, we've just gone through the process of rolling out age assurance, not just for adult content, but also for a lot of social media sites and gaming sites. This is also happening across Europe under the Digital Services Act. And we recently had a big case in the US, Paxson versus Free Speech Coalition, which has set up the legal basis for age verification for at least for adult content in the US. So it's been a very, very busy time for us. And then we saw the bill in India requiring that you give consent for personal data to be shared, but critically, you needed to be an adult in order to do so, and children can only do that with parental consent. So, of course, as a trade association, my eyes lit up because I suddenly realized there were 1.3 billion more people who would need to be customers of the age verification industry, because you can't accept that consent until you know it's come from an adult. And that's basically whenever we see any legislation which wants to treat adults differently from children online, then that is a use case for age verification. So that's why I'm here today, but I'm probably here to listen and learn as much as any of the people just watching are. I probably have less to contribute than some of our domestic contributors from India itself.
Well, I'm confident that we're all going to be learning something today, but I'm also very confident that you have your piece to help us along our journey today, Iain. So thanks again for joining us. And we also have the final member of our panel for today is Joel R. McConvey from Biometric Update. He's here to tell us a little bit more about how age assurance and restrictions are playing out around the world. So I just want to say good morning, Joel.
Good morning, Chris. Thank you for having me. I think my contribution to the conversation this morning is really going to be to try and contextualize the DPDPA in terms of what's happening around the world. We have many acronyms in the age assurance world. We have the OSA, the DSA, the GDPR, of course. So really, I think that what I want to look at is, what the common goals are across all these efforts, where India fits, and what makes these, what specific contexts make these things different. And I think, maybe leading into the discussion, India is unique for many reasons, but to me, the 2 specific issues that repeatedly come up, we've mentioned parental consent, verifiable parental consent, but I think it's also worth mentioning the device sharing issue. You have lots of people in India where the family shares a device, siblings share a device, and those are, not unique to India, but they are particular challenges when it comes to designing an age assurance system for 1.4 billion people. So that's why I'm here. I, like Iain, hope to learn, and I'm very happy to be part of the discussion. So thank you.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, your point is spot on, Joel, in terms of while not a unique situation in terms of device use in India around the world. India is, I would say, so anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the first of those countries where that is common to be taking this step. So, I mean, we're really still in fairly early days, right, for all of this stuff, whether we're talking in England, which is relatively far along, in India, which is relatively far along, though not quite as far as the UK, and, you know, certainly where Joel and I are in Canada, we are much further behind, like most of the world. So I think a lot of us will have a lot to learn about today. So I'd like to first turn to Shreya to give us a little bit of an outline of the DPDPA and its implications for parental consent and what we can expect over the next while.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. The DPDPA is the new data protection regime in India. The act was enacted and notified back in August 2023. It has been in the public domain for quite some time now, but has not yet been brought into force. The draft implementation rules for implementing the act and ensuring the processes under the act are taken care of was put out in the public domain back in January. They have received a lot of stakeholder feedback and comments on that, and now we hope to see the final rules take shape and form sometime this month or the next. And once that happens, the new regime will be in effect and will be implemented in a phase-wise manner. What this entails for businesses is similar to GDPR and data protection regimes elsewhere in the world. There is a significant focus on having consent before processing of any kind of personal data. And where consent may not always be feasible to be obtained, there are certain other grounds of processing which have been provided for, but those are predefined grounds, for example, in relation to purposes of employment, or where there is a statutory obligation for collection and processing of personal data, or where there is a very specific purpose which has been identified and it is implied that the personal data is being provided only for that purpose. Those grounds are not as wide as GDPR, as some of the audience may already be aware. But that aside, there are limitations around how this framework is going to operate and work. And there is a lot of focus on providing as much information as possible to the individuals whose data is being processed. When it comes to child protection, so there is talk of verifiable parental consent, as you rightly mentioned. So when we talk about consent, there are two layers. One is taking a consent from the data principal. The second layer is where the data principal or the individual whose personal data is being processed is a minor. And in India, a minor is any individual below the age of 18 years. So if that be the case, verifiable parental consent of verifiable consent of either the parent or the guardian must be sought. That is a requirement under the Act itself. How that is going to be implemented, what that will translate to in terms of process, is currently being deliberated under the draft rules. Why this requirement even exists is twofold. The first being that in India, it is any contract entered into with a minor is considered void. So it is not a valid agreement. And the idea is that if at all there is any use of personal data under the new regime, it has to be on the basis of certain consents that have to be taken, which would translate in effect to a valid and enforceable contract between the parties. So that is where, that's the legal basis for where this requirement stems from. And aside from that, there is also a significant need felt from a moral perspective to protect children in India, because children have increasing access to technology. There is all kinds of content out there. How to manage that, how to manage access and limit that access is something that, you know, policymakers are grappling with at this point in time. Of course, businesses love it, but there is a point of debate here, and there is a need to put in place a framework which works not only for the businesses, but actually effectively protects the children that are accessing information online and how their personal data is being processed. Because there is a lot of targeted advertisement, there is a lot of behavioral tracking and monitoring. So, in order to keep a check on that, what has been proposed in the law is that A, verifiable consent has to be taken. B, there cannot be any processing of children's data which is to the, which is to the detriment of the child. So it has to be ensured that even with appropriate consents, whatever processing of that information is being done for good and cogent reasons and morally sound reasons. So that is number one. The second restriction that has been brought in is that there cannot be any tracking or behavioral monitoring or targeted advertisements to children unless there are exempted classes of businesses which are called out by the government. So only those businesses can carry out behavioral monitoring, tracking, or targeted advertisements for limited purposes only. So this is what the law prescribes, and the law also makes an exemption for certain businesses which are effectively, if they can prove that they are operating and creating a verifiably safe environment for the children who have access to the platform, those businesses may be exempted by the government on a case-by-case basis as well. So the focus, which has not been translated so much in the rules, is also on having a verifiably safe environment so that the child feels safe when they are accessing that platform. So this is broadly what the law prescribes. The rules which talk about procedures and implementation aspects of how to bring this to fruition, what they indicate is that whenever a child is accessing the platform or an individual is accessing the platform, uh, the parent needs to get involved and provide the parent's respective identity. There has to be reliable information provided and processed of the parent to demonstrate that the concerned individual is an adult, and their identity has to be proved. Interestingly, the requirement is to process the parent's identity credentials. It is the proposed rules are silent on the identity credentials of the child at this point in time. But there are, I would say, there are views in the market that lead us to believe that definitely more information would be required to even assess in the first instance whether a child is accessing the platform or an adult. So that's where you have to factor in whether the approach is going to be taken on a self-declaration basis, whether the business is going to have to deploy additional means to verify the age of the individual accessing the platform. So this is a broad lay of the land. And how the credentials are going to be taken of the parent, it is proposed that they will be tokenized credentials if the parent is already a user of the platform in question. Their existing credentials will be taken up and validated against the child which is trying to access the platform. If the parent is not on the platform, there has to be a use of government-enabled tokenized services such as DigiLocker, which needs to prove the identity of the parent. So all of these linkages have to be integrated into the platform to ensure that appropriate individuals are taking the onus and responsibility of providing consent for their respective children. So that's the broad lay of the land. I hope that was useful for this panel as well.
I think that's a great start. Thank you, Shreya. Really gives us a sense of the attempt by the government to build some nuance and some different conditions or recognize some different circumstances for data processing, but also the challenge that everyone faces actually implementing this and dealing with it. It sounds like you can imagine thousands of businesses scrambling to look through those exceptions and carve-outs and so on, and looking into the case-by-case, exemptions and so on. So there's a lot to get to there. I just want to really quickly mention before I turn to Pratishtha that we are recording this webinar, and we will send all attendees, all of you will get an email afterwards with a link to the recording, so you can watch it back if you missed the first minute or something like that. We will also be doing a quick question and answer session towards the end using the Q&A link towards the bottom of your Zoom screen there. So I would like to encourage all of you listening and watching along to ask questions as they occur to you, or hang on to them and see if we address them along the way. And in a little while, we will answer some of those questions. But in the meantime, Pratishtha, can you tell us a little bit more about why youth access to social media is such a concern in India, and I guess just more broadly what those main concerns are within the community?
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for that question, and Shreya for putting that outline about DPDPA, because access is main thing in the overall DPDPA if we talk about access to technology. So if I read this question in a way, it has two narratives, right? I look this question from two narratives. One is that youth has access, but is not using it appropriately. And the other is that many youth still lack access, right? Because if I largely look into the Indian domain and the diversity that India brings in, that distinguishes between the two narratives that I read this question, or I hear this question as. So just for the background, and I want to take you back from my own youth engagements back in 2014 when I actually started talking to youth, when IT Act was being followed, and when in India social media or internet was at its boom, right, is when we started doing the major programs on digital safety. And we never imagined that, there will be a point which will not be much, but only a decade, that we will have a standalone act, which will be DPDPA, looking into the whole of digital personal data of the individuals. So, if I look into largely, social media has evolved over the period of time, right? Over a decade, when I started actually working with youth in 2014, and now in 2025, when I see youth, it is a big shift. And the meaning of access has drastically changed over this period of time. And I was actually thinking that, in 2014, when I first stepped into a session with the young voices, with young adults who are accessing to technology, we heard them that, there were a lot of fears attached to them of using internet. But today it is completely very different, right? We understand the meaning of access in many different ways. And if I want to kind of, broadly break down access, the word access in the question, then I would say that, in India, access means differently for different set of people. So it can be access to devices, it can be access to internet connectivity, it can be access to platforms and content, it can be access to opportunities, and it can be access to guidance and safeguards as well. So wherein we are talking about parental consent, it can be looked into broadly into the various aspects of access that India brings in. And it differs again from state to state and from individual to individual of how this access is being managed. So if I want to encapsulate the different access points, then I want to say that there has been a major transition, and this transition is that back then when there were limited phones, and now with smartphones, they have become the primary gateway with cheap data plans, right? The access has become it is more easy to access because now with low cost we have data plans which can be used in a day's time or in a month's time. Then connectivity to internet was only urban centric earlier. If I have to kind of look back and see, it was primarily because it was expensive back then. But now if we see that it has become affordable. Without internet, I think no smartphone is working as well, right? If somebody owns a smartphone, you need to have internet access to that, and this has tremendously grown in tier 2, tier 3 cities as well, because smartphones which just cost INR 10,000 also needs internet, right? Even if you have to use it, so it needs it. And but this purely doesn't mean that people have become digital literate, for that matter. There is a huge generational digital divide that exists and that we also witness. And coming from a civil society perspective, and also given the amount of experience that we have engaged with youth in India, all these points actually, when I think about it, this is what we have seen over the period of time, and this has been the standalone points that we have been raising to many people, that these are the concerns that needs to be addressed even in the law, right? From these perspectives, that whatever policies are being drafted, these needs to be taken into consideration. And also, a very basic point is like when back then, if I look into earlier times of internet usage or a decade back, the primary reason of access was to to access something which is educational, right? Which is something which is meaningful, and very few entertainment sources, because meme culture or the shorts culture or the reel culture was not there back then. So people were actually finding meaningful content on internet, and there was no content moderation also. So what we talk about ads or what we talk about parental consent now, it is all becoming, because with the given technology, with given time, the patterns have also changed. And now young users, they consume and create content that we see. And also now what I have seen in the younger audience is the Italian brain rot that is being going gaga, that kids are also talking about it, they're speaking in that language. So what is that is drawing attention over there is very very serious, even for parents and educators, for that matter. And why the parental consent is also becoming a crucial point in this discussion. So what we see is that that with access, there are many opportunities that one can benefit from, even social media, but it totally depends upon how it is being used. While it could be learning, it could be enhancing skills or finding a job, but same access creates a risk of exploitation as well, right? Risk of manipulation, and a risk of addiction of if it is not age appropriate content. So broadly, access has been broken down into these factors as per my understanding and as per my work, given the work that I have done. And when I say this, I also mean that at Social Media Matters, since we have extensively had conversations with youth, try to understand their own accessibility. It has also made us understand that the huge digital divide that we see, right, is also because of the quote unquote accessibility, right? And like while tier 1 youth is still more privileged with fast Wi-Fi internet connections, but yes, the other section or the other communities are still finding it a challenge with internet limitations. It could be 1 GB plan per month as well. So here I believe that with this shift in access, there also have been gaps. And that is the reason why youth access is a major concern in India, right? And this challenge is not something, but today they are online, but the quality, context, and consequences of that access is actually becoming a major concern. So what I feel about it and what is lacking is that, of course, the shared devices point, which has been already kind of raised and also been said about it, is one of the major issues, right? Largely, the population does believe on shared devices because of the economic strata they come from or the affordability criteria. But yes, it is one of the major concerns, and that keeps switching between the content that an adult is watching or a minor is watching. So with a shared device, it will remain a problem. So what's given in DPDP, of course, Shreya has laid that down for us in the rules as well, and how it is being taken care of. Because I've also observed, many young kids who are minors, who are toddlers, while they're watching content on shorts or reels, absurd content with shared devices is actually coming on their screens. While we see that, there is a mismatch with connectivity and digital literacy, young people navigate harmful or manipulative content, and that is with little support. We see that, there is a lack of products that have been designed which are not child first design, or they do not have that approach, or that is lacking, which largely exposes youth or young children to, pornographic content. There are cases of grooming, scams, misinformation, and I think so. India has the largest youth population on internet today, right? So that also makes it a point for us to think about that. Why it is becoming a major concern again and again. And these are the real incidences, real experiences that we have gone through. We have heard them, many of them crying to us that this has happened to us on social media. So the flip side of when I said initially that there are two narratives, the flip side is that, there are difficulties for them to, even when they're accessing social media, right? The scams, we did a research on sextortion last year, and if I rewind back my memory, there were so many cases in a day that we were able to handle, or we were able to guide and support victims of, that were being targeted especially, and the tortured and the amount of mental stress that they had because of the gaming scams that they were going through. So, so how do parental consent is what we bring into this discussion.
So that's great context, Pratishtha, and very you raise a couple of really interesting points that I think we're going to have to come back to during our discussion as well, about the divide between different communities, rural and urban communities. And it sounds like we've gone from a situation with not a lot of access but a lot of fear to some of the fears went away. For some people, the access has increased a lot, then inspiring other fears, but how to control that access, or at what point it should be limited, certainly a thorny question, and sets up this this complicated situation, and then how to do so without affecting all those parents and their access maybe as well. So now this is of course happening in the context of a global conversation. So Iain, I'd like to bring you in at this point to tell us a little bit about what's been happening in the UK. The Online Safety Act is in full effect now. We have enforcement actions and all sorts of stuff going on there. And so yeah, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what's happening there and some early lessons from that experience.
Thanks, Chris, and hopefully my broadband is going to hold up. I feel like I might well be in rural India right now, given the number of times I've had to switch between my phone and my broadband. As you know, on July 25th in the UK, we adopted very, very broad requirements for age assurance, covering not just adult content, but also social media and gaming sites, any sites where people have user-to-user interaction. We have learned a few lessons from that. I mean, people are nervous about giving their data to third parties that they've never heard of who are doing these age checks. So we think we need certification of those providers up front so people have confidence in their data protection. It's often unclear whether you're giving your data to the website itself or to an independent third party, and whether that data is truly going to be deleted after you proved your age. We're worried about the ability for people to lend their credentials from one user to another, and the extent to which you've properly authenticated that the individual is the person who previously did that age check. And there don't seem to be any limits yet in our regulations about how often you would do an age check to prove either that the original one is still valid or you haven't given that detail to somebody else. We saw some attacks on some of the facial age estimation using PlayStation avatars. And then there's been a big issue around VPNs and people using a virtual private network to pretend they're not in the jurisdiction where the law applies, which could be a problem in India as well. And then we also found that some platforms were using really brilliant age verification solutions, but then turning off a lot of the security controls, making them really easy to circumvent. So, I'm sure we can talk about those lessons learned in more detail on another day, but just to sort of relate this back to what we're thinking about in the Indian context. I think we're seeing the cycle repeat itself, where people are going through the same learning curve that we had in the UK and in France and Germany and Australia and the US. I mean, first of all, I'm not sure anybody realized when they passed this DPDPA law that it would require universal age assurance. I'm not sure anybody necessarily foresaw the extent of that impact. And then the next thing is that, well, this is just going to affect the kids. This is just about children proving their age, when the reality is, of course, it's really much more about adults proving they are adults and has very little to do with children or children's data, which is obviously where people get very sensitive. And then people also default to assuming when we talk about parental consent, we're talking about verifiable parental consent as defined under COPPA, which is the US law. And I always joke that it's neither verifiable nor parental. In the way that's being implemented. It's an extremely lightweight approach and sort of requires people to effectively confess their age and then nominate their parent. And I'm not sure that process would come in any way close to meeting the legal requirements in India under the new act. So, and then there's also the question around binding the child to the parent. How do we do that in India? Actually, this is not pure age assurance, because by definition with a data protection law, you're looking at revealing personal data. That's the purpose for giving consent. So it's not an anonymous process in the classic sense of age assurance. Although there is a question as to whether, the extent to which you would want the personal data you use to prove your age to sit with that data controller. They may still process lots of other data about you, but that needn't be your passport or your Aadhaar number. And then finally, on the Aadhaar question, which is obviously India's existing digital identity solution, it's an interesting question as to whether that offers an answer to this or not. There are lots of, I think, concerns about how that's created, the extent to which you can effectively self-declare your date of birth when you create one. And it's had some notable security failings in the past, which make people a bit nervous about it. And there's also, I think, a court finding that you can't rely on the Aadhaar to legally prove your age fairly recently. So lots of really interesting specific issues around India, maybe some lessons to be learned from the UK. But I think this is a really interesting starting point for the conversation, and a huge, as I say, learning curve for all those involved, from the government to the regulators to the lawyers and to the platforms. Everybody needs to get along this curve, and I hope we're going to help with that a little bit today.
Absolutely agreed. And I think part of the issue with the learning curve here is that because it is a different approach, the lessons aren't all going to be the same, right? So some of the, it's not really an attempt to copy and paste or cut and paste kind of thing. So that makes it a little more interesting, a little more challenging for everyone. So Joel, I'd like to ask you to sort of fill in just a little bit more, kind of take us kind of the rest of the way around the world on that, issue of age assurance and parental consent. Can you take us a little further?
Will do. I mean, I think what's emerging to me in looking at the different markets around the world is you kind of have the McDonald'sization of age assurance, if you will, which is to say everyone's been trying to make a cheeseburger. And then, okay, so they make the cheeseburger, and then it's like, well, some people don't want the cheeseburger, they want the chicken burger. So you have facial age estimation or document verification, fine, you have options. But now we're finding out that if you go to a different market like India, you're going to have to offer the McSpicy paneer burger. If you go to the UK, in certain markets, you're going to have to offer the steakhouse stack because people have specific needs. And so I think we're really looking at a market that is going to require responsive approaches to locality. I mean, I think even within India, that's a big place. So you're going to have local challenges depending on certain communities, certain geographical areas, like obviously access is a problem. But I think it's also just worth considering, the very specific issues that define this particular use case. I want to point to the article that sort of spawned this webinar. It was appeared in Tech Policy. It was written by Jalak M. Kakar, Shashank Mohan, and Angelina Dash out of the Law University of Delhi. And they point out about the gender gap in access and about how girls tend to have less access to technology. And so there you have an additional layer of challenge. If parental consent is the chosen method, how do we, or is there even a way to address how that's being doled out or controlled on that level? And that's a social issue. I don't know if age assurance providers can solve it, but it is a problem. I just want to touch on one of the things that I think is interesting is the common challenge across these jurisdictions. And that's balancing the autonomy of the child with the digital protection. And that's sort of, I think, what's turning out to be a bit of a soup sandwich across the board. You can see in the UK, we have arguments over Wikipedia. In Australia, we have arguments over YouTube. And Pratishtha was talking about the exemptions and how certain businesses will have carve-outs, or maybe that was Shreya. But I think that's a flag to me, because that's the wedge where YouTube can go, okay, we're good for children. And frankly, you're almost shifting. You're now not just deciding what's harmful for children, but you're deciding what's useful for children. And how do you weigh that in a specific cultural context? I don't know. It's a big challenge, but I think the opportunity, of course, is that India is looking to lead on this. Certainly it stands to be a blueprint for the global South in terms of how to deploy a system like this. So I don't have answers, but I think there definitely are common challenges that different jurisdictions can look at to say, how do we solve this? How do we arrive at a point where we understand we are benefiting the child, not cutting off access, but then also very much emphasizing that it's going to be up to providers, if they want to enter the market, to say, how do we address these very specific challenges? We can't just go in and say, this is our burger. We have to dress it up in such a way that it's going to be appropriate for the local market.
Absolutely. And a common set of challenges emerging, but all these different kind of approaches to solving them. So I do want to turn to audience Q&A fairly shortly, as we have a few questions coming into. So thank you to those who have posed them. But so Joel, you've raised this responsibility that falls on businesses. And Shreya, I'd like to come back to you at this point and ask, how do you see that when your clients reach out to you or you talk to businesses serving Indian internet users? How are they responding? What are they doing? Are they ready? Is this going to work?
So definitely most of the businesses in India are not ready. The reason for that also is because the law has not yet fully been formulated on how the verifiable parental consent process will play out. Secondly, of course, because the law has not been fully formulated, and this has been the biggest point of debate under the draft rules among a couple of other major issues, but this is one of the bigger problem statements that different stakeholders are finding difficult to put in play or motion in terms of preparedness for the implementation of this new regime. Uh, the the major concern, of course, is in relation to the complexity involved in operationalizing this and the financial and infrastructure costs that this may entail. Because we have to understand that India as a market, when it comes to collecting children's data, there are different players out there, ranging from startups to MSMEs to mid-size and large-size businesses. So it is not, businesses are not seeing this or are having trouble seeing this as a one-size-fits-all solution. And there are proposals to have, a tiered compliance for different categories of businesses and different purposes. So there is an exemption that has been proposed for certain classes of businesses, for example, educational institutions, health and medical institutions, any entity which is carrying out state functions. But there are also purposes which have been identified, and those include purposes pertaining to providing certain services or benefits that are mandated by statute. They pertain to providing, of course, education, sanitation, and a lot of other services. So in those sectors specifically, there are carve-outs for how personal data can be processed, and in a lot of these situations, parental consent would not necessarily be required. But where the consent is required, since there is a mandate at present in the proposal to integrate with agencies that provide tokenized identity verification mechanisms, so that integration cost is going to be huge. There is general lack of clarity in which kind of entities can feature here. Is there a requirement to also effectively verify whether the person accessing the platform is a child or an adult to begin with? Because self-declaration, as other panelists also pointed out, would not necessarily work. And how do you establish the relationship of a parent without establishing the identity of a child? And then the problem occurs, is this a moat to sort of get more and more access to information, to create a system where more users need to be onboarded on the platform? I mean, this should not be misused to enable network effects in that sense. But the objective of a data protection law cannot always be to get access to as much information as needed. So if it is a tokenized offering, who is going to be the custodian of that data? It cannot necessarily be the business, because that also poses more risk. So there is definitely a gap to be filled here in terms of who will operate these tokenized offerings if the proposal goes through, and how to ensure that these organizations are data blind. If at all, data is being passed on, personal data is being shared between entities, is there a requirement to ensure data blindness, or does every business get to see the identity proof to establish, the relationship? So these are some of the issues that stakeholders have brought up, and these are definitely important reactions to consider. But one last thing I would like to point out is that there is a class, there's a new class of stakeholder which has been introduced by the Act, which is called a consent manager. So the consent manager is going to be empowered to facilitate the providing, reviewing, managing, withdrawing of consent across data fiduciaries. It's supposed to be an interoperable platform, or that is what is envisaged. And they are supposed to be data blind. But this class of stakeholders do not exist as of today. So whether they can be leveraged to provide this service, and how they will be integrated into the larger system remains to be seen. Yeah, those are, I mean, a few industry feedbacks. Of course, I could go on and on about this topic, but I'm in my mind, trying to cut the conversation a little short since we are soon to be running out of time.
Well, no, I think those are all good points, and I think that several of them are also present in our questions as well. So I think we are going to return to those things. I do think that several of the members of Iain's organization would suggest that they can at least potentially play a role in that consent manager class. Iain, did you want to chime in on that? Just quickly before we turn to a Q&A?
Yeah, there's definitely some specialists in parental consent, like Kids Wed Services, part of EPIC, and Prevo. Who've really focused on maintaining that consistent consent. We're also working on a new IEEE standard on parental consent, because we thought it would be helpful if everybody understood exactly what they are giving consent to when they give consent. So if we could have some standardized functions that parents can say yes or no to, so we can then educate parents around that, rather than having to understand every single game or social media platform and what risks it's exposing their kids to configure each one exactly the way they want it for their child.
Well, a good point. Yeah, that standard should help. And if we get the standard, we get some market participants and a little bit of clarity on what the details of the act are, what the requirements are, then surely there will be some targets we can at least aim at. We do have a few questions here I'd like to quickly hit, as we are starting to run out of time. But the one question here is, do you think that the rules require the verification of the parent-child relationship? Brackets given the focus on identity verification, or is a declaration by the parent that they are the parent likely to be the market's approach? And so I will, I'll send that over to whoever
I'll,
wants to field it. But also, I
I'll
just
be
want to quickly
happy
flag.
to take that up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is some debate here. It is I mean, as a lawyer would say, it is a gray area. But having said that, no, there is definitely more steps that a business would need to take to establish the relationship between the parent and the child, because aside from an obligation to just seek the consent of an individual identifying as an adult or as the parent, there is also an obligation on the business to carry out some level of due diligence for checking this. So how they do this, I mean, two of the methodologies that have been provided are what we discussed. One is to review reliable details of the identity and age available with the data fiduciary, or to use these tokenized service providers to get access to virtual tokens for the identification and then verify the relationship. So some degree of diligence will need to be adopted here.
Which is noteworthy in part because we have already had the precedent of, let's say, not diligence, which is what Iain referred to earlier as not parental consent. So, I mean, this model, which we know logically can't work, is already out in the world. So maybe there's a better approach to be found. Let's hope. Another good question here. Does any application, we've touched a little bit on this, but I think it bears going back to, does any application in India require age verification or age limiting it? For example, if we have a cricket application to share scores, commentary, news, and videos with people around India, do I need a user's age to be verified in that case?
Okay,
Shreya,
happy to take this
yeah,
up again, no problem.
please.
So it is not specifically called out which fiduciaries have to take on this exercise, but it is presumed that if you have a lot of traffic from minors, or if your platform caters to minors in general, and you know this, generally speaking, so gaming platforms could qualify, social media platforms could qualify. There, yes, you would want to put in that obligation, or rather that process, to carry out this age verification check and seek the consent of the relevant parent and guardian, simply because any non-compliance could result in significant penalties. And if you know that you have a lot of users from this age bracket, or if your service targets people like that, then it is very, very prudent to do this.
So probably, you probably got it. You
Yeah.
probably have obligations.
Yeah.
Cricket, very popular amongst the youth, I understand. You're going to have some young people on your platform for sure.
I think, though, Chris, that just to me, that raises the categorization problem again you're seeing with Wikipedia. Is we've decided we need these laws, but it doesn't seem that we've decided exactly yet where they need to be applied. So that's an ongoing discussion throughout the world.
Yeah,
Sure.
so just one thing to throw in there. There is no there is no requirement that only certain businesses have to do this. By and large, there is a general requirement which presumes that all businesses will do this, other than a few which have been exempted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I mean, even if you change the example a little bit and say, okay, well, it's an app to encourage and organize, youth cricket playing, right? We might say, well, it's a health activity, right, or something like that. So, if we change it a little bit, we can maybe. It's easy to certainly imagine where it would be very tricky, but it's going to be a lot of businesses, obviously. We're just about to the bottom of the hour, or the top of the hour here, but I would like to race on here with another question or two, if we can. We have a good question about whether age assurance is really necessary here. I wonder whether, instead of intrusive practices such as AA, improved digital literacy measures on navigating the thorny internet landscape might be better. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but aside from the good work that independent organizations such as Social and Media Matters do on digital literacy, government measures have not been uniform or largely effective. So, Pratishtha, I'd like to turn to you on this one. Now, I mean, of course, some of us on the panel will take issue with the characterization of age assurance as intrusive, but I don't think we're going to sort that out for all of the world's people, or get everyone to the same opinion today. So, yeah, Pratishtha, could you just pick up on the digital literacy side of things?
Yeah, thank you. There are a couple of initiatives that even the government has taken in terms of digital literacy, where there is an independent wing under Ministry of Home Affairs, which is called I4C. They're doing some sessions, capacity building programs in schools for children, so that they can build they can actually literate them with what the digital existence is right now in India. Also, there are other government initiatives which are being taken by the ministries independently. They're running campaigns. The ministries' socials are quite active with the information that people can consume about how they need to safely navigate these channels. So quite a lot of initiatives, and also, of course, CSOs like us, we are independently doing it. And there are a couple of researches that have also taken place that, what more can be done about digital literacy. Of course, we cannot cover anyone and everyone given the population of India, but then the idea is to maximize the whole content and making people more literate about what you need to be aware about when you are in the online spaces. So our vision is that even if the basic information is given to them, that do not click on a fraud link, do not believe any message that come across. Even if the basic measures are given, I think so India will be in a more safer hands.
Very good. Thank you, Pratishtha. Yeah, definitely a lot of work still to be done there, right? I just want to go back quickly to Iain because we've got a couple of questions about that standard for parental consent, and one that was just added about whether that will refer to, or if the consent record information structure defined in ISO IEC TS 27560 has been considered. Iain, I am out of my depth when we get into we get off my 2 or 3 or 5 ISO standards that I'm very familiar with. But yeah, if you could give us a few seconds on that.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that other standard. I don't think that is overlapping with this. The two elements to the IEEE standard is, one is how strongly is the relationship between the child and the adult confirmed, and that should be proportionate to the harm, obviously. So if you're giving consent to, I don't know, donate a kidney, you probably want to have a much higher level of assurance that the parent is the right parent than if it's to open a TikTok account. So we'll be taking that. And then there was the aspect which I spoke about earlier of the different things, the different functionalities, the categories that you're giving consent to. We thought it'd be helpful to have some sort of standardization around what it is parents are asked. So those are the two functions. I think that other ISO standard is a more of a technical way of transmitting your consent rather than talking about those other two things I mentioned.
So a piece maybe, but dealing with a different area of the interaction. So I want to take one more question here. I also want to mention we've got a number of good questions here, so thank you to all who submitted them. We have a record of those questions, and so I would like to encourage all of you who don't have your questions answered live on the webinar to reach out to us, reach out to Pratishtha, reach out to Shreya, reach out to Iain. And we will also have a chance to see those, and on one or two cases may be able to get in touch with you and provide some sort of response or feedback. But yeah, there's a question here that kind of introduces another curveball or another wrinkle into things, just to maximize the complexity that we're dealing with. Would AI agents or chatbots also fall under the data fiduciary of DPDPA to obtain parental consent? For example, Google Gemini. It's gathering data, isn't it? Shreya, I would say that seems like it would take that responsibility on as well.
Yeah. So definitely any business or platform which is in a position to decide what kind of personal information has to be collected and why, what is the purpose involved, all of those platforms would qualify, or businesses would qualify as data fiduciaries. If, however, businesses are providing B2B services where they are creating chatbots for other businesses, then they would qualify instead as data processors in all likelihood. And of course, a lot of this will depend on the roles and responsibilities distributed between the parties involved. But broadly, the test is to see who is in control of what personal information is being collected and who is determining the purpose of that collection.
Perfect. A solid answer at last. One of few that we've been able to provide, but I think that we've really shared some good information and hopefully some helpful guidance for everyone on the call today. I really want to thank Pratishtha and Shreya very much for joining us, and Iain, thank you for taking time to share your insights on this interesting matter. We may have to do this again in some number of months or maybe next year as things continue to develop. But I again want to thank you for joining us and sharing your thoughts. I want to thank everyone who joined in, who contributed questions, who listened along and followed along. And we will be back again soon to talk more about the various issues in digital identity and biometrics. So thank you very much to everyone. We're going to call it there, but have a good day, and we will be back again soon to talk more.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.